The moment a stranger ripped the boarding pass out of my pregnant wife's hand, my son said 6 words that froze the entire airport. When 7-year-old Noah stepped into gate 43 at LAX, everything stopped. Not in the dramatic, movie scene way, no screeching brakes, no sudden silence. It was subtler than that. Conversations thinned. A few heads turned. Someone mid-step slowed, without realizing why. The boy looked like he'd been assembled in a hurry. His sneakers didn't match, one gray, one navy, and the left one squeaked faintly with every step. One sock was soaked through, the fabric darkened and clinging to his ankle. His sweatshirt hung a big, sleeves swallowing his hands, except for one fist clenched tight around a folded boarding pass, so tight his knuckles had gone white. Behind him, his mother struggled forward. She was 8 months pregnant, her body angled awkwardly, like gravity had started negotiating its own terms. One hand braced against the cold metal of a gate chair, the other pressed firmly against the underside of her stomach, fingers spread, as if holding something in place that might otherwise slip away. Her breathing wasn't loud, but it wasn't steady either. Each inhale came with effort, each exhale with relief that didn't last. The departure board chimed overhead. Final boarding call. A voice reminded everyone pleasantly, professionally, that only Group A should be approaching the gate. Noah didn't hear it. He took another step forward, eyes fixed on the scanner, on the promise of movement, of not being stuck anymore. That's when the boarding pass disappeared. It wasn't snatched violently. There was no shove, no struggle, just a sudden absence. Paper gone from his hand, replaced by air. A woman stood there now, blocking his path. Her nails were perfectly manicured, pale pink with a glossy finish that caught the fluorescent light. The fingers pinched the boarding pass like it was something mildly inconvenient. Her perfume hit a second later, sharp, expensive, out of place among the recycled air and burnt coffee smell of the terminal. "This isn't how boarding works," she said, already turning the pass over, inspecting it. "You can't just—" Noah's breath hitched. It wasn't a sob yet, just a sharp intake that got stuck halfway in, like his lungs forgot what came next. His eyes filled immediately, tears blurring the world until the gate lights smeared into bright, unfamiliar shapes. He didn't reach for the pass. He just froze. Around them, people noticed. A man lowered his phone. A woman across the aisle paused mid-sip. Someone shifted their carry-on aside as if making room for something unnamed. Behind Noah, his mother straightened instinctively and paid for it. A flash of pain crossed her face. Her hand tightened against her stomach. For a moment, she looked like she might fold in on herself, right there on the terminal floor. "Noah," she whispered. Not sharp, not panicked, just tired. The woman finally looked down. Really looked at the too big sweatshirt, the wet sock, the way the boy's shoulders were pulled up toward his ears, like he was trying to disappear inside himself. Something in Noah broke loose, then not loudly, not silly. His voice came out small, fragile, but clear enough that the people closest to him leaned in without meaning to. "Please don't," he said. The woman sighed, already annoyed. Then Noah added, his voice trembling but certain, "My baby sister is in there." He nodded, just slightly, toward his mother's stomach. For a beat, no one spoke. The gate agent's keyboard clicked once, then stopped. The scanner beeped somewhere down the line. Forgotten. The hum of the terminal seemed to recede, like the world had leaned back to listen. The woman blinked. Passengers exchanged glances, confused, curious, unsettled. No one yet understood what Noah meant. But something had shifted. Something fragile and important had entered the space between strangers. They would understand soon enough. This was an airport gate where rules were law. Not the kind written in ink and posted on walls, but the invisible ones everyone followed without thinking. "Stand here. Wait there. Don't cross the rope until your group is called." Zones and numbers mattered more than faces. Boarding orders were barked through tinny speakers every few minutes, each announcement layered over the last, turning language into background noise. People here protected luggage before people, screens before souls. 100 passengers filled the gate area, some standing, some sprawled across chairs, some pacing with phones pressed to their ears. They pretended not to look the way people always do when something uncomfortable threatens to interrupt their schedule. I stayed forward, shoulders angled away. Interest was masked as indifference, but awareness lingered anyway. Thick in the air, at the center of it stood the woman who had taken the boarding pass. Her hair was smooth and immovable, styled into place as if turbulence itself had been negotiated in advance. A designer bag hung from her shoulder, structured and spotless. its gold hardware catching the light each time she shifted her weight. Her posture was rigid with certainty. This was someone used to space bending around her lines parting, rules flexing. Her voice was already rising, not shouting. Not yet. It didn't need to. There was a sharpness to it, an edge that signaled escalation was coming, and everyone within earshot felt it. The kind of tone that warned, I know how to make this difficult. The flight crew noticed immediately. They always did. Gate agents and attendants developed a sixth sense for these moments, the subtle tightening of jaws, the hands planted firmly on hips, the emphasis on certain words. They exchanged glances without turning their heads. Silent communication honed by long shifts and longer memories. That type. The look said the kind that quoted policy when it served her and ignored it when it didn't. The kind that knew exactly how close to the line she could stand without technically crossing it. And standing just a few feet away from her was Noah. He looked impossibly small by comparison, not just in height, but in presence. His shoulders curved inward, protective, like he was bracing against a wind no one else could feel. His hands hovered uselessly at his sides now, fingers twitching as if still searching for the boarding pass that was no longer there. Kids didn't belong in confrontations like this. Airports weren't built for children. They were built for efficiency, for movement, for adults who knew the language of urgency. Even the chairs were wrong to hard, to cold, bolted into place so you couldn't curl up if you needed to, especially kids like Noah. Kids who hadn't yet learned how to make themselves loud. Kids who believed rules were meant to be followed, not bent. Kids who thought adults would automatically do the right thing if they just waited long enough. Noah didn't interrupt. He didn't shout. He didn't tug on anyone's sleeve. He just stood there, eyes darting between the woman and the gate, trying to understand which invisible role he'd broken. Around him, people shifted. A man adjusted his backpack straps and took half a step back, as if distance might absolve him. A woman scrolled faster on her phone, thumb flicking with unnecessary urgency. Someone cleared their throat, then thought better of it. Silence grew heavier, not empty, but crowded with things no one wanted to say. The woman let out an exaggerated breath and turned slightly, making sure the nearest agent could hear her. I'm Group 1, she said, tapping the boarding pass with a manicured finger. And this is holding everyone up. She didn't look at Noah when she said it. She didn't have to. In a place governed by momentum and order, the child had become an obstacle and unexpected delay. A complication no one had budgeted time or patience for. Noah felt it, even if he couldn't name it. He took a small step back, closer to his mother, shrinking into the narrow space adults left behind when they decided a problem was easier to ignore. And for a moment, just a moment, it looked like the rules of the place were going to win. A flight attendant knelt down first. Not for the woman with the designer bag, not for the growing tension curling through the gate. For Noah, she moved slowly, deliberately, lowering herself to his eye level as if the rest of the world could wait a moment longer. Her uniform rustled softly as she crouched, the smell of starch and coffee clinging to the fabric. She didn't reach for him, didn't invade his space, just made herself smaller so he wouldn't have to feel so small alone. That's when she saw it. The bruise on his arm wasn't fresh. It had already begun its slow transformation, deep purple fading to yellow at the edges, the way injuries do when they've been carried quietly for days. The shape wasn't random. It curved around his upper arm, thumb on one side, fingers on the other, fingers shaped. Her expression didn't change, but something behind her eyes did. A tightening, a remembering. She softened her voice even more. Hey, buddy, she said, careful, warm. Who did that to you? Noah shrugged. It wasn't dramatic, just a small lift of one shoulder, practiced and automatic. The kind of motion kids make when they've learned that answers lead to consequences, and silence feels safer. Kids who've learned not to trust adults always do. Behind him, his mother tried to straighten, instinct more than choice. She pushed against the chair with both hands, jaw tightening as she forced herself upright. She didn't make it all the way. A sharp breath escaped her as she bent forward again, one hand flying to her stomach. Pain crossed her face, not loud, not attention-seeking, just there, honest. The kind of pain that's been around so long it stopped asking to be noticed. The flight attendant clocked it immediately. The guarded posture, the tension that never fully left her shoulders, the way her eyes kept flicking to Noah, checking him, even while she was struggling to breathe through whatever wave had just passed. The attendant tried again. Same tone, same gentleness. Did someone grab you too hard, sweetheart? Noah shook his head, a firmer answer this time, chin down, eyes on the floor. No. The silence stretched. That's when the woman holding the boarding pass let out a sharp, impatient laugh. "Oh, come on," she said, glancing at her watch. "Can we hurry this up? I paid for priority. This is ridiculous." The word ridiculous landed hard. Noah flinched like it had been thrown at him. Something in him finally cracked, not all at once, but enough. "She falls a lot," he said suddenly. His voice was thin, but steady, older than 7 should sound. He lifted one hand and pointed not accusingly, just factually toward his mother. "She tries not to, but sometimes she does." His mother whispered his name, a warning wrapped in love and fear. Noah kept going. "Dad's not here anymore," he added. "He said airports are where people leave." The words hung in the air, unfinished, heavy with what they didn't explain. The gate felt different now, closer, quieter. A few passengers shifted uncomfortably. Someone behind them inhaled sharply. The flight attendant stayed exactly where she was, eyes never leaving Noah's face. Today mattered because this flight wasn't a vacation. It wasn't a business trip. It was an optional. It was a hospital across the country. A specialist they'd been referred to after 3 misdiagnoses and 1 long night in her. That smelled like antiseptic and fear. A high-risk delivery. Words whispered between doctors who thought parents couldn't hear. It was the last seat they could afford after selling things that had once made their apartment feel like home. And now that thin rectangle of paper creased. Essential was in someone else's hand. Noah looked up then, eyes glossy but determined. "If we don't go," he said quietly, "my sister might not make it." No one scoffed this time. Even the woman fell silent, because this was no longer about boarding order. It was about a child who understood, far too young, what was at stake and had no other way to protect it than to tell the truth out loud. Lead flight attendant stepped forward. She didn't hurry, didn't posture. She moved with the quiet confidence of someone who had already made a decision and saw no reason to announce it. The murmur of the gate softened as she passed, conversation stalling mid-sentence, attention drawn by something more powerful than volume. This wasn't about policies anymore. Everyone could feel that line had been crossed. It was about what kind of people they were going to be when the rules stopped being enough. Behind her, the crew members exchanged a glance, one leaning close, voice low. "Meant only for her. We can't get involved," he whispered. "It's not our place." Another added, even quieter, "If we escalate, we delay boarding. People are already restless." The lead attendant listened, nodded once, took in the information the way a pilot takes in weather reports, useful, but not decisive. Then she stopped directly in front of the woman. The gate seemed to hold its breath. She didn't raise her voice, didn't cite a regulation or point to a laminated sign. She didn't need to. "Ma'am," she said evenly, "give me the boarding pass." The woman blinked, surprised not at the request, but at the certainty behind it. "I'm in the right boarding group," she snapped. He was in the way. "You saw it." The attendant didn't argue. "Give me the boarding pass." A pause stretched between them, brittle and sharp. The woman tightened her grip on the paper, nails pressing into the fold. "No," she said. "I'm not giving it back until security was called." Not with flashing lights or raised voices. No running feet. Just a quiet word into a radio. A measured response set into motion. Certainty, not urgency. The kind that doesn't ask for permission. As the woman continued to protest, words tumbling over each other now, volume climbing, another crew member moved toward Noah. "Hey," she said softly, holding out a small box of juice. "You want this?" Noah hesitated before taking it, glancing back at his mother for permission. She nodded, her face pale, lips pressed tight. Another attendant guided her gently toward a chair near the window, one hand hovering close, but not touching unless needed. A jacket appeared navy blue, still warm from someone else's shoulders, and was draped carefully around her, cocooning her against the blast of airport air. "You're okay," the attendant murmured. "We've got you." Noah stood between them, juice box clutched in one hand, eyes locked on the woman and the boarding pass. Security arrived moments later, two officers, calm, professional. They listened, asked for the pass. Their presence shifted the balance instantly. The woman's protest lost momentum. With a sharp, frustrated motion, she shoved the boarding pass forward. The lead attendant took it. She didn't look at the woman again. Instead, she turned and knelt in front of Noah, holding the paper out to him with both hands, like it was something fragile and important. "Here you go," she said. This belongs to you. Noah reached for it slowly, his fingers wrapped around the edges, small and careful, as if expecting it to vanish the moment he touched it. He folded it once more, exactly the way it had been before, and pressed it to his chest. He didn't smile. There was no victory in his face, no relief big enough to show itself yet. He just held the boarding pass like it might disappear again, like it was the only thing standing between his family and something he was too young to name, but old enough to fear, round them. The gate remained quiet. No applause, no cheers, just a shared understanding that something important had happened, not because it was loud or dramatic, but because someone had chosen to act when it would have been easier not to. The boarding process resumed eventually, but the rules no longer felt quite as absolute, because for a brief moment, humanity had been allowed to step ahead of priority. The rumor spread fast. It moved the way things do in crowded places, quiet at first, then unstoppable. A sentence here, a glance there. Someone leaned over and whispered, "Did you see what just happened?" Another raised their phone, pretending to check messages while the camera rolled. Passengers filmed. Whispers rolled down the jet bridge like a low tide, pulling attention with it. By the time the boarding scanner beeped again, half the gate knew there had been a moment. Not the full story, never the full story, but enough to feel that something had tilted off its usual axis. Noah felt it too. He stood close to his mother, the boarding pass still pressed flat against his chest, juice box forgotten in his hand. His eyes tracked movement now, crew members conferring, security stepping away, the woman being guided toward the side exit with stiff, furious dignity. The world hadn't gone back to normal yet. Then came the moment no one expected. Before boarding resumed, before the gate agent could lift her microphone, before the line could reorganize itself into neat obedience, the cockpit door opened. The captain stepped out. He wasn't in a hurry. His uniform was crisp, sleeves rolled just enough to suggest long hours and practical decisions. He scanned the gate once, quickly, like someone reading weather. Then he walked straight toward Noah. Phones rose higher now. People nudged each other. This wasn't protocol. This wasn't routine. The captain stopped in front of the boy and did something that made the entire gate fall silent. He knelt, not awkwardly, not performatively, just enough to meet Noah at eye level. Noah stiffened, instinctively bracing for something else to be taken, something else to be explained away. The captain spoke quietly. Whatever he said wasn't meant for the crowd. Noah listened. His face shifted, not into a smile, not yet, but into something looser, something less guarded. His shoulders dropped a fraction of an inch, like he'd been holding them up for a very long time. The captain nodded once, stood, and turned toward the gate agent. Then he reached for the intercom. His voice carried easily, calm and steady, the kind that usually announced cruising altitude and weather over Denver. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "thank you for your patience. The gate's stilled completely. We've reassigned to seats." He continued, "First class for a heartbeat." No one reacted. Then the meaning landed. Gasps rippled through the gate, not loud, more surprised than excited. Phones rose openly now. No one pretended anymore. The captain gestured gently toward Noah and his mother. "These seats are for them." The woman who had taken the boarding pass didn't argue this time. She was escorted away quietly, firmly, her heels clicking once, twice, before the sound disappeared down the side corridor. No one watched her leave for long. They were watching the boy, as Noah and his mother were guided forward. The jet bridge opening before them like a promise. Something unexpected happened. Applause started, not all at once, not explosive. One pair of hands, then another, then a ripple that grew just enough to be heard. It wasn't loud. It wasn't triumphant. It was respectful. Human. Noah turned, startled, eyes wide. He didn't wave, didn't bow. He just leaned into his mother's side as they walked, his hand slipping into hers, holding tight. She paused once, overwhelmed, and nodded, just a small nod to the crowd. Not gratitude exactly, acknowledgement. As they disappeared down the jet bridge, the applause faded on its own. People exhaled. Lines reformed. Boarding resumed. But the gate didn't feel the same. Later, much later, that moment would be clipped into a video barely 2 minutes long, cropped, captioned, shared. Millions of times, people would argue about rules and entitlement, and who deserved what. But the reason it spread had nothing to do with outrage. It spread because, for a brief moment in a place ruled by urgency and order, strangers watched kindness take the lead, and they didn't look away. That was the Moment it went viral. Not because it was dramatic. Because it was true. Change doesn't happen all at once. It doesn't arrive with music or announcements or a single moment you can point to and say, there, that's when everything got better. It comes in fragments, almost unnoticeable unless you're looking for it, in gestures so small they'd be easy to miss if you weren't the one holding onto them. It happened when the plane landed and a nurse was already waiting at the gate. She didn't introduce herself loudly, didn't rush. She simply knelt in front of Noah the way the flight attendant had, eyes kind, badge turned so it wouldn't clink. She explained where they were going, what would happen next, and that his mom was in good hands now. She let him ask questions. She didn't lie. It happened in the hospital hallway where the floors gleamed and the air smelled like antiseptic and something metallic. And the administrator, who glanced at the paperwork, then pushed it aside and said, "We'll sort this later," in the wheelchair that appeared without being requested, in the way no one asked for proof that they belonged there. It happened online, too. Messages began arriving, some long, some just a sentence. "We saw you. You did nothing wrong. Your kid is brave." Noah's mother read them late at night when machines hummed and sleep wouldn't come. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. It was enough to know that someone, somewhere, had paid attention. The baby was born early, smaller than she should have been, her skin almost translucent, her breath shallow and fast like she was still deciding whether the world was worth the effort. Tubes and wires framed her tiny body, turning her into something fragile and complicated all at once. Noah stood on a stool beside the incubator, his hands pressed flat against the glass. He counted her breaths the way the nurse showed him. 1, 2, 3. He whispered her name so softly it barely stirred the air. She stayed. That was the first victory. A few days later, the flight attendant visited. She wasn't in uniform this time, just jeans, a sweater, and something nervous in her smile. She brought a stuffed airplane blue, soft, wings slightly uneven. Noah hugged it without hesitation, for when flying feels scary, she said. Noah nodded solemnly. "Thank you for kneeling," he replied. The words hit her harder than anything else had. The captain sent a letter. It arrived folded carefully, the paper thick, the ink slightly indented where he'd pressed too hard. He didn't talk about policies or procedures. He talked about choices, about moments when you decide who you're going to be, even if no one's watching. Noah's mother kept that letter in her bag, took it out when the nights felt long. Time kept moving. The baby grew stronger, gained ounces, lost tubes, learned how to breathe without help. The machines quieted, one by one. And somewhere in all that forward motion, the woman who had taken the boarding pass faded, not into forgiveness, not into villainy. Just out of focus. She was replaced by something else entirely, a patchwork of nurses, attendants, strangers, messages, quiet decisions made by people who could have looked away and didn't. A community that formed without meetings or names, people who showed up when it counted, then stepped back without asking to be remembered. Noah didn't understand all of it. He just knew that airports didn't only take people away anymore. Sometimes, if you were paying attention, they brought help right to where you stood. 3 years later, Noah stood on a school stage. The gym smelled like polished wood and old banners, the air thick with the hum of parents shifting and folding chairs. A banner stretched crookedly across the back wall, Assembly Day in letters that had been cut out by careful hands. The microphone was a little too tall, angled down awkwardly, forcing Noah to stand on the balls of his feet. In his hand, he held a paper airplane. It wasn't white. It had been folded from a sheet of blue construction paper, the creases sharp and intentional. The wings were slightly uneven, like whoever made it had prioritized flight over perfection. Noah waited. Not because he was afraid, because he was listening. The room had to settle before he could speak. He'd learned that somewhere along the way, when he leaned into the microphone, his voice came out steady, clear. He didn't skin the audience, didn't search for his mother. He looked straight ahead, like the words mattered enough to face them head on. "Airports aren't where people leave," he said. A ripple moved through the room. Not sound, exactly, but attention snapping into place. "They're where you learn who stays." He paused, letting the sentence land, letting it finish itself inside the people listening. In the front row, his mother pressed her fingers into the strap of her bag. Her hair was pulled back now, practical and neat, no longer hiding exhaustion, but not defined by it either. She watched her son with the kind of stillness that only comes when you're afraid to blink, in case you miss something important. In her arms, Noah's sister slept. She was warm and solid, her breath slow and deep against her mother's chest. One tiny hand peeked out from the blanket, fingers curled loosely like she was holding onto a dream. Noah lifted the paper airplane. "I made this," he said. "My mom showed me how. She said planes only work when everything holds together." A few parents nodded without realizing they were doing it. He didn't talk about the gate. He didn't talk about the boarding pass. He didn't say first class or viral or video. He didn't have to. Instead, he said, "Sometimes grown-ups are busy. Sometimes they forget to look down." A murmur of quiet laughter moved through the gym, gentle and understanding. "But sometimes," Noah continued, "they kneel. And when they do, things get better." The paper airplane trembled slightly in his hand. "Not from nerves, from effort. I used to think I had to be loud to help my family," he said. "But I learned you just have to tell the truth and hope someone hears it." Silence followed. Not the awkward kind, the full kind. The kind where everyone is present. In the back row, a teacher wiped her eyes. Near the aisle, a father leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor as if replaying a memory he hadn't planned to revisit. Noah took one last breath, then he let the airplane go. It didn't soar. It didn't crash. It glided smooth and gentle, landing near the edge of the stage, exactly where it needed to be. The applause came slowly. Then all at once. His mother stood without thinking, careful not to wake the baby. Tears traced down her face, unchecked and unashamed. She met Noah's eyes and nodded just like she had in the airport years ago. He nodded back. The audience understood then not just the story, but the truth inside it, that moments don't save us. People do. And sometimes, all it takes to change a life is someone choosing to stay. Boarding pass is framed now. Not in anything ornate, no heavy glass or polished wood. Just a simple frame that hangs slightly crooked in the hallway of a small apartment. That smells like coffee in the mornings and clean laundry at night. The paper inside it is creased, faded at the edges, soft where it was once folded and unfolded by nervous fingers. The ink has begun to lighten. The barcode no longer sharp enough to scan. To anyone else, it would look like trash, something meant to be thrown away the moment its job was done. But it's still real. It's real because it once mattered more than a seat number or a boarding group. It mattered because it represented motion when standing still would have meant loss. Because it was held by a child who didn't yet know the language of power, only the language of truth. Sometimes Noah takes it down. He traces the creases with one finger, remembering how tight his fist had been, how afraid he was that if he loosened his grip, everything would slip away. His sister sits nearby now, legs tucked under her, listening even though she already knows the story. "That's where you flew," she says every time. "That's where people helped." Noah answers. "They don't talk about the woman. Not anymore. She's not the point. The point is the nurse who waited at the gate, the attendant who knelt, the captain who chose to interrupt routine, the strangers who clapped not because they were told to, but because they felt something they didn't want to ignore." Kindness, Noah has learned, doesn't arrive with instructions. It doesn't ask if it's convenient. It doesn't wait for certainty. It doesn't require permission. It only requires courage. The courage to kneel when standing would be easier. The courage to speak when silence would keep things moving. The courage to see the smallest person in the room and decide they matter just as much as anyone else. The boarding pass hangs there quietly, doing what it has always done, holding space for a moment that could have gone another way. A moment when roles could have won, when indifference could have passed unnoticed, when a child could have learned that the world doesn't stop for people like him. Instead, he learned something else. That people can choose, that help isn't always loud, but it is always deliberate. That showing up can change the direction of a life. So here's the question, simple and unavoidable. What would you do if someone smaller than you needed help? If a child stood in your way, frightened and hopeful at the same time, would you rush past? Or would you slow down? If the rules told you to keep moving, would you obey them without thought, or would you look closer? Because the truth is, moments like that don't announce themselves. They don't come labeled important. They don't promise recognition or reward. They just arrive, ordinary and uncomfortable, asking quietly who you're going to be. The boarding pass doesn't answer that question. It just reminds us that we all will be asked it again and again in places as ordinary as an airport gate, a hallway, a line we're tired of waiting in. When that moment comes, be someone who shows up.